What if the difference between chaos and progress is just one person who knows how to say yes when everyone else says no? Thanks for being here, Frank. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, Mike. It's a mindset. Not everything is doable, but it's possible. Most people are concerned more about their next comment and not really hearing the person. I think the biggest mistake is thinking each negotiation perhaps as a zero-sum game versus what our philosophy is, which is everybody wins, meaning finding common ground. They had a chance to create a team, a culture of yes. So there was a project called Willets Point that was stagnated throughout the city for about 2 decades. It became a successful project that was completed, 2,500 of affordable units, an environmental cleanup, an infrastructure build out, the first ever private funded soccer stadium in New York City's history. And a blight on the community is now going to be a thriving community in and of itself with activities and beauty.
This isn't just a conversation, it's a blueprint for leading through chaos, building trust, and getting things done when it matters most. All right, people, today we have an absolute powerhouse in the world of law, business, and government. From negotiating high-stakes deals to navigating the political landscape of New York City, Frank Carone has seen it all. As the former Chief of Staff to New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a renowned business litigator, and now the founder and chairman of Oaktree Solutions, Frank has spent over 30 years solving some of the most complex challenges in law, business, and public affairs. Named a top expert in business negotiation by Forbes and a super lawyer, he's the guy you call when you need things done fast and efficiently. We're diving deep into his career, his expertise in crisis management, and how he's shaping the future of business and government relations. So buckle up, because this conversation is going to be a masterclass in leadership, negotiation, and strategic thinking. So thanks for being here, Frank. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, Mike, and I appreciate that introduction very much.
Yeah, so let's just get started. You've had a pretty diverse career. I mean, you don't meet too many people who've gone from law to government to business consulting. So what do you think is the common thread that connects all of those experiences?
Oh, it's a great question, and it has been a diverse career. But the common thread and the theme that really has propelled me throughout these endeavors has been long-standing, meaningful relationships where there's mutual value and respect from both sides of the relationship. And I do my best to keep those relationships cradled and over long periods of time. And they've really helped me change direction many times.
Yeah, relationships. I love the word because people think of it as like, romantic this or, business relationship between two businesses. But I've found over the years, I've been a CTO for 2 decades, and I have found that connections that I had like day one are still being called upon for assistance because I've nurtured those relationships over time. So I think that's a good issue there. So you've worked with as a business negotiator. What's the biggest mistake people make when they negotiate, and how can they fix it?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's not understanding and listening to a colleague or someone you're negotiating with, listening to their issue, and really speaking less versus speaking more. Most people are concerned more about their next comment and not really hearing the person finishing, which I almost just did with you, and I still to this day editing myself, as we all need to do and monitor our own behavior. But I think the biggest mistake is failing to listen, and also thinking each negotiation perhaps as a zero-sum game versus what our philosophy is, which is everybody wins, meaning finding common ground, finding commonality so that there is a creative solution for both sides to come across somewhat winning, not a winner and a loser, We do not believe in that. It has not worked for me. What has worked for me has been continuously finding common ground. And to do that, you have to be willing to listen and listen carefully, and not only listen, but understand what it is you're listening to. And you do that, again, by asking questions, by diving deep, by being curious and sincere.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned the listening part, because I can tell you that, I've sat here, I've done 120 interviews in the past 2 years. And when I first started, that was a struggle, was just, basically bite your tongue and don't say anything and let the guest speak. But over time, when you keep training yourself to do that, it gets easier and easier. But even then, like, I still find myself in just regular conversation every day, having to remind myself, oh, wait a second, they're not done talking. It actually is a really hard thing, to not think about what it is you're going to say next, but actually listen. And I mean, sometimes you can tell when someone does that too. They'll say something that's completely out of place, and you're just like, they really didn't pay attention to the entire thing that I said. So, kind of a interesting point you make there. So, let's see. You've been on the front line of many major businesses and government initiatives. What's a project that you're particularly proud of, and why?
Well, I guess what I'm most proud of, it was bringing then Borough President Eric Adams, who came to sit with me in my law office and say, look, I'm going to begin a journey to run for the mayor of the greatest city. We believe the greatest city, certainly the largest in our United States. And he sat with me, and we began the strategy to make that happen. And it was a labor of love, and it was an incredible privilege to actually participate in that and ultimately succeed. And really, it was extra special because we were coming in after 8 years of another mayor, so we had a chance to create a team, a culture of yes, a culture to get things done, to break through bureaucracy, and it was really special to be part of that transition, and in many ways to lead it, and then come in as chief of staff and create an incredible administration. And I tell people all the time, it was the greatest privilege of my life, accomplishing that, and looking where we were in January of 2022, sitting in City Hall with masks on, offices empty, crime rampant, not a lot of confidence in the business opportunities in New York City. And here we are 3 years later, very different place.
So tell me about this culture of yes that you mentioned.
There is a sort of, and I think President Trump and his administration is tapping into this as well. There is a reality in bureaucracy to start with a no, or start with this is difficult, we haven't done it before. And there's good reason. Bureaucratic workers don't get a lot of credit when it goes well, and they get a lot of critique when it doesn't go well. So understanding that is really, really important. And it's amazing me. It always amazed me when folks came to us. Either I did it as an attorney or as a government specialist, or when I'm sitting in the seat of a regulator myself, not really getting the issues that need to be overcome in order to move and give the confidence to try something new. So we decided, let's start with a yes, and then figure out, as long as it's lawful, and then as long as it's doable, and in our budget, try to accomplish what it is we're being asked of from a position of open-mindedness and yes. And we called it. We called it, let's start with a city of yes. And then ultimately, we created a real estate transition period and rezoning called City of Yes, but that came later. We coined that very early on, that we're going to be an administration of yes. And it's a mindset, Michael. It's really a mindset of anything's possible. Not everything is doable, but it's possible. And if you go into it with a mindset of creative energy and not necessarily being fearful of just because it hasn't been done or it's novel, not to do it. So that was really something we were proud of. And I just like to add on to that. The mayor is really big believer in creative technologies and the power of technology. So we created this incubator office within City Hall so that all the, I'm just going to say, crazy ideas that came filtered in, and you walk through the streets of the city of New York, and 9 million people, 30 million opinions. How do you sort of bring that together in a place that's efficient? So we created an office where there was a link so that we could have an initial review of ideas as they came in, creative ideas, and then if they really had significance or had meaning, value to the city or the city agencies, they would sort of work its way up the chain into the Office of Technology. But that initial incubator office was something very, very new, and it changed the culture also of City Hall and became much more tech oriented.
You know, it's interesting because I was hoping that's what that was going to be about. Because as a tech leader, I believe in, you know, letting my people do their job. So I mean, I hired them for a reason, let them do their job. And so that even comes down to, and I've dealt with this from the other side. It even comes down to when they're invited to a meeting, I don't inject myself into that meeting. I let them have their meeting. But I also tell them that there's three answers to certain questions. There's either a yes and no or a let me check into it. And I tell them that if you ever feel like you have to say no, don't say no. Come talk to me. There might be a way, because it's a very common thing with tech people, right? They see someone asks for something, rather than probing some more, they just say no, can't do that. Sorry, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. And I don't feel like that's good customer service from anybody. You have to at least explore it first and see if it can be done. And I think that when you have it kind of, you know, hearing this firsthand from you, it kind of explains to me, because I actually, you know, um, from a political standpoint, I don't necessarily side with Mayor Adams on a lot of things, but from what I've read, he's a very forward-thinking leader, and I can see why. I mean, if he had a culture, if he introduced a culture of yes, where, you know, we're going to try it, we're going to look into this, and we're going to try to make it happen, if that's good for the city, that makes him a great leader, if you ask me. And regardless of any, like, you know, ideological differences politically, that makes him a great leader. I mean, I kind of look at what you said, you know, with Trump too, and I think at least he's trying to do what he ran on. It might not be the most organized way ever, but he's trying to do what he ran on, you know. And I think that's great to hear that a mayor of, you know, United States' biggest city has that attitude, because it is a mindset attitude and it comes from the top. You know, if he has that attitude, the rest of the staff has that attitude. So here's a good one for you though. Do you have a framework at all for making high stakes decisions under pressure?
Well, yes, we do. I do. And it's something that we wrote about in our book, Everybody Wins, which is a second volume coming out soon. It really, really begins with a term we like to use, and it's maybe you hear about it on social media a lot, now, called tactical empathy. Goes back to what I said a little earlier. The framework is listening. Another way of referencing it is getting backstage into the mindset of the person who is coming to you with a intractable problem or an opportunity. So it starts with listening, and there's nothing more powerful when a person feels viscerally that you're focused on them in your eyes, your body language suggests that you're listening, you're getting it, and then you're offering poignant, strategic questions to pull out even more, but also engendering confidence that you're really hearing what is being said to you. And then you're using examples of when you had, or you had examples of similarly situated, not necessarily specific issue, but the concepts. So there is a process. The good news is it starts with the right mindset to learn and listen, and it's learnable. It's learnable, and it's a skill that's some people do it more intuitively than others, but nonetheless, it's eminently learnable. I find it particularly sympathy and empathy with the tech community, because by its very nature, you're starting and asking for something different usually, and people are uncomfortable when it's different. I could just, if you indulge me for a moment, a story when I was a tax and limousine commissioner under Mayor Bloomberg, and the novel idea came about an app-based hail system versus the raising of your hand into yellow cabs, and it caused it to create uproar. But from my perspective as a commissioner, I couldn't even fathom how New York City cannot, leading tech center of the world, some people call it Technology Alley, would not have an app-based system. So we debated and we ultimately voted, and the rest is history. The Ubers of the world and the rest followed suit. But that first idea sounds commonplace today. Everyone uses it, but it wasn't when it first came to us. So really, for tech entrepreneurs, they have a little higher hurdle. So listening is even more important, and having someone who could break down those silos and really have an open mind is critical to I think any new tech entrepreneur who wants a shot at government procurement or private procurement, whatever works for them.
So you mentioned your position as commissioner for New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission, and I know you led some major changes. Looking back at that now, how do you think the industry's evolved, and do you think it's in a better place today?
I think the industry has grown. It's a great question. I do believe it's in a better place. I do believe there's room for improvement, though. There is still, I think, an area where yellows, I'm calling them yellows, those are the traditional yellow taxis who bought into the system versus the app-based that not necessarily did. So I think and I'm not, of course, in that industry anymore, but there's certainly areas that it can improve. And I think it's not complicated to do so. But all in all, many families were able to send their kids to baseball practice, to piano lessons, to school using an app-based service. And I think it was most effective in the areas outside of the central business of Manhattan, where you just don't have yellow cabs available, and the old neighborhood car services don't exist anymore. So if you're in one of the areas, we call them the outer boroughs, I call New York City the outer borough, but Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, it's been really helpful to families to have that service, and even as simple as going to the doctor's office. So that's all just a positive, I think, occurrence in my estimation.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And it's something that Las Vegas is lacking. We rely a lot on Uber and Lyft, and even then, relying on them is dangerous because you'll get in an area and they'll just reject every ride in that area. But having the ability to be able to like get your kid to baseball practice when you're not getting off work until when practice starts is that's a great thing, especially if it's a safe way to get them there. Obviously that's a key. So you know you your position there in New York, you're dealing with New York politics, and I know that that can be pretty intense. So how did you handle the pressure, and what's maybe if you could share, what's one behind the scenes story that like really sticks out to you?
Yeah, so I was prepared for the pressure. I grew up in Canarsie section of Brooklyn, and I like to say that people talk about Brooklyn, but there's the borough itself, but there's also the streets of Brooklyn in the 70s and 80s, very different place. And you learned a sense of grit, a sense of authenticity. And then later on, I was fortunate enough to be commissioned as a lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. So those experiences really hardened me in one specific respect, the ability to be yourself. And authenticity really is a calming elixir to really work through any issue. And plus, I always every time I get a phone call from somebody from City Hall in politics, and I always say, wait a minute, we're not in the Battle of the Bulge. We're not fighting in a war in Gaza. We're not fighting for our lives. Let's take it slow here. This is all workable. Let's keep things in perspective. And I always had that mindset. I had an uncle who suffered with cystic fibrosis. I had a grandfather who fought in the Bulge. And I'm always reminded of their real suffering. So everything else was just, nothing so serious that I couldn't handle. And I remember my first real week in City Hall. There's a room where the press sit called Room 9. And I just walked in and I said, look, I know I took this job. My life has to be transparent, and the colleagues come in whenever you like. My door is open. And it started a relationship that I won't say it's good or bad, but it was just honest and transparent. And I think it worked well for me.
That's really interesting. I mean, I've been involved in local politics in a small scale, and it's so different from the business world, yet so very similar. And in a lot of cases, in smaller cities especially, you get people into city council who maybe it's a concerned mom who literally had no business experience, and everyone backed this person, and so they won the position. Then they have to quickly like learn on the job. So like you co-authored Everyone Wins. It's a book about optimizing business relationships. What's one key takeaway from the book?
I get a key takeaway that really always resonated with me, and I just keep going back to it, is bringing value through listening in a habitual way to my clients, my colleagues, my business partners. And you do that through creative thinking, through active listening, because at the end of the day, with any endeavor, what somebody wants is value accretion. And we work in the intersection of legal, regulatory, political, and technology, and they're all intertwined. So having an understanding of how that ecosystem works is something that we talk about a lot in the book. We talk about experiences and a process of bringing value to any situation, and you really can do that, but you really need to do that through a specific conscious effort of listening and discovery.
Yeah, there's that word listening again. So what's the most unusual or unexpected negotiation you've ever been part of?
Yeah, well, no, maybe I won't use the word unusual, but I'll give an example of where starting with a yes and listening has paid off. So there was a project called Willets Point that was stagnated throughout the city for about 2 decades. It needed a complex negotiation between private industry, private titans of industry, the state, the city, union community, local community, and the bureaucracy. And I'm proud to say we led that negotiation. We all got into the room several times, and I always began every meeting with an affirming that we're doing this project. This is not a debate whether we're going to do it, but we're doing it. And it became, after a stalled, intractable problem for a couple of decades, it became a successful project that was completed, 2,500 of affordable units, an environmental cleanup, an infrastructure build out, the first ever private funded soccer stadium in New York City's history. And a blight on the community is now going to be a thriving community in and of itself, with activities and beauty. And we all work together towards that goal, and we all listen to each other's issues in the room, from private industry to the state to the city to labor. And we had an enormous announcement, and very proud of that. We've done that a few times. And another one called Kips Bay, a several $billion project together with the state, which was a abandoned garage and became a tech center, biotech center, now being built in Kips Bay section of New York City. And I could go on, but these accomplishments required putting ego aside. That's another thing we have to really focus on, and I say a lot in the book, and listen and find common ground in every conversation. And the mayor says that a lot too. He gets criticized because he's a Democrat, of course, in a Democratic city. Why are you cooperating with the president? He goes, wait a minute, we're the biggest city in America. I'm gonna, cooperate with whoever that leader is in power, we're all Americans after all. So we're going to cooperate, and we don't have to agree, as you said earlier, but we doesn't mean we have to disagree or be disagreeable. There's always common ground. It's a theme in the book that we go to often.
Yeah, you always have to try to find that common ground, I think. And I think in politics, it's just such a temptation to, oh, I'm Democrat, you're Republican, so whatever you say, I'm going to disagree with it. And I can remember, being much younger and not having that issue. Yeah, some people are on one side of the aisle, other people are on the other side of the aisle, but they try to find common ground and work for the better of the country. And I think of late, like maybe like the last 10 years or so, we've kind of lost sight of that. But so if you weren't in law, business, or politics, what would you be doing instead?
Playing golf. Well,
You're a golfer.
I love what I'm just all kidding aside. I'm not sure. As an entrepreneurial minded person, I'm always excited like a child of hearing a new idea. So the beauty of being in a city that's large as New York and in a business and in embracing a philosophy of relationships, I'm always learning from people, either directly, indirectly, vicariously, and as a result, hearing different opportunities that I may or not choose to involve myself in. But in Oaktree, where we work as strategists, it's rewarding because it's diverse and diverse people, diverse ideas, challenging ideas, and seeing how our advice and our structure brings some of these ideas to life is very rewarding.
All right, so here's a personal one for you. What's the most Brooklyn thing about you?
I guess my accent. I mean, oh, you sound like you're from Brooklyn. My attitude, my entire being. I grew up in Brooklyn. Both of my parents were born in Canarsie as well as I have. So it's in our fabric, but we grew up loving America, loving the freedoms that she provides. But at the end of the day, home was Brooklyn, is Brooklyn. Unfortunately, it's as we'll see how life takes us. I have all the children now, so we'll see how that goes. But I guess my mannerisms and the way I speak, if I had to guess.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like my background is, my mom and my dad, were born and raised in New York. I was born in Long Island. And what I notice about New Yorkers in general is you can kind of, besides the accent, you can kind of tell because I think there's the culture of the city kind of it gets ingrained into you and you just take things with you. They become a part of you that doesn't happen in other areas of the country. Do you have a go-to stress reliever or maybe any rituals to stay grounded?
Yeah, I read quite a bit. I spend time with my family, and I do enjoy collecting wine and learning about the beauty of the grape. So I try to, my wife is an excellent chef. We're both foodies. So when just to settle down and relax, we think about, exotic dishes to make, think about special wines that go with that and what areas of the world they're from and how they've, grown. Other than that, like I joked a little earlier, but I do enjoy getting out on the golf course as well.
Yeah, that could be a stress reliever. It could also be a stress causer.
Or stress causing. Yeah. Yeah, but it's a labor of love.
So this has been an amazing conversation. I mean, you probably have the most diverse experience of anybody that I've had on this show, and I really appreciate you being open and sharing what's on your mind. But if the listeners want to reach out and connect with you and maybe take advantage of working with you, how can they do that?
They could go on the website for the book, everyonewinsbook.com.
Awesome, awesome. Well, again, thanks so much for being here. It's not always easy to take time out of your busy day to sit down and talk to a perfect stranger, but I do appreciate your time.
I really enjoyed it, Mike. Anytime. Love to be
I will.
back.
Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. New episodes every Wednesday on YouTube and LinkedIn, 8 a.m. Pacific time. And YouTube thinks you will like this video that's on screen now.